In the Zone, the Daily Beacon Sports Podcast is back with the usual suspects. I'm Caleb Jarrow, sports editor here at the Daily Beacon, joined with Eric Woods, assistant sports editor, and Jack Church, staff writer. And we are back again. Tennessee defeated UTSA on Saturday. I'm sure we were all surprised by that. Jack, Eric, how are y'all doing today?
Fantastic. Well, not so good, but I'm doing good.
That was
I
quite
don't know what that means. But
That was quite.
I have a little bit of a cold. That's all. I'm doing good.
I was doing good. Now I'm going to catch Eric's cold because he's sitting right next to me.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It would be detrimental for the sports section if we were sick. So,
well,
we are not going to get sick, and we are going to talk about what Tennessee did to UTSA on Saturday. Jack Church's first college football game.
yeah.
That's actually not true.
Covering. It was
No, that's also not. I covered Boston College and Louisville in 2020.
That's not real football. All right. Jack, we will start with you since you're such an expert from covering high school football in big stadiums. 45-14 win for Tennessee. What stood out from the win to you, Jack?
I mean, the first play of the game was really the eye-opener for me. Joe Milton taking up the left side, going for 81 yards. Hearing Carlos Lopez screaming "Dale Seis" over and over again.
Give him 6.
That was a real eye-opener to me because I wasn't sure how much of a threat Joe Milton would really be in the run game. And I know it's UTSA, but just seeing him break one off for that long was something I wasn't expecting coming into the game.
Yeah, no, and your first 10 or so plays of the game are scripted. So it was scripted for him to run the option. I don't know if it was scripted for him to take it and run. I definitely don't think it was scripted for him to take it 81 yards and score to open the game against UTSA. Eric, what were some of the things that stood out to you?
I mean, I think outside of Joe Milton, the biggest standout was Dylan Sampson. He's someone who got a total of 4 touches the last 2 weeks. Didn't appear at Florida, and then all of a sudden, I mean, he had 4 touchdowns against Virginia, and then all of a sudden he comes out this week and they start giving him the rock, and he makes plays. He's someone who I think it's very difficult to keep out of the lineup. Even though the running back room is stacked, but I mean, 159 total yards, 2 touchdowns. There was a drive where he himself took 2 plays for 70 yards and a touchdown. And the drive before, I believe, 20-yard shovel pass from Joe Milton. Not a shuffle pass.
Yes, shuffle, not shuffle.
But yeah, I mean, I really liked what I saw. I mean, obviously, the third quarter didn't stand out too well, or it stood out for all the wrong reasons for them. But I mean, there was that was a little bit of a red flag for sure, but they found a way to bring themselves back. So props to them.
Well, nobody talked about the defense, so I guess I will. Let's talk about some Tennessee defense. You're playing UTSA, and they're without their 7th-year starting quarterback. So you're seeing Eddie Lee Marburger, and he's the second string, but he can sling it. And they sacked him 4 times. In particular, Tyler Barron came into this season with 7.5 career sacks, and he has 4 already this year through 4 games. Had 1 against UTSA. Tamari McDonald picked up a sack. Caleb Herring picked up a sack. Freshman Caleb Herring. And Omar Norman-Lott also got 1. Omar Norman-Lott only played 1 half of football because he was suspended, and he got a sack himself. So that's good to see. Aaron Beasley leads you again in tackles. The defense, I feel like, going into South Carolina, which we'll break down that game even more later on, I feel like that's the biggest question mark because Spencer Rattler threw for 6 touchdowns last season. And the easiest way to get better at pass defense without getting better defensive backs, Jack, is to rush the passer. And they seem to be rushing the passer, so that'll take some of the stress off a defensive back room that has not historically played well for this team.
Yeah, and it was especially evident against South Carolina last year. I mean, I've said it before that the Tennessee secondary has a tendency of making mediocre quarterbacks look like Heisman contenders, and that was what they did with Spencer Rattler last year. I think that bringing that pressure and forcing Rattler to make some quicker decisions is going to help a lot in alleviating that pressure off the secondary. but I think you're still going to need your cornerbacks, Kamal Hadden in particular, to make some plays defensively, and I'm not 100% sure that the secondary has drastically improved since that 63-38 game.
Hey, Kamal Hadden is, I want to say, tied for second in the league for pass breakups. But that also means he's getting targeted a ton, which is not a good sign. Warren Burrell got an interception this weekend. I didn't have that on my bingo card. I'm with you, Jack. I don't know how much the secondary has improved, but I do think that's the biggest piece for this team. And the pass rush does help, but you sacrifice a lot when you have to bring a blitz. I mean, the whole middle of the field is empty. They could also run the ball or throw a screen. That's about all Tennessee did on offense was throw screens. Eric, what do you think? I mean, UTSA was kind of a bounce back for the defense. Last season, we saw them hold Will Levis to 98 yards, give up 600 yards to Spencer Rattler, or 438 yards to Spencer Rattler and 6 touchdowns. What will the defense look like? Do you think, did they show you enough on Saturday against UTSA to instill more confidence in you, Eric?
They did until that third quarter. I mean, I think if everything's going well for the defense, then things are going to be great. But you start, I mean, 2 weeks ago at Florida started out with their punch with Trey Wilson pretty much carrying the whole first drive. They missed the field goal, but it was basically Florida daring them to stop them, and they couldn't. So had they gotten a stop, or I guess it was a stop considering it was the missed field goal, but I mean, Florida drove it all over them, and it showed the rest of that half. But I think you come out Saturday, and if you get a stop on, I don't know if I'd say the first drive, but if you get like a stop or two in the first couple drives, then I think you're looking really good for the rest of the game. But if Spencer Rattler comes out and starts in touchdown drive first drive, then I don't think it's gonna look too good. They preached all off season about trying to pass rush with 4 people, and they've had a little bit of success this year with it, but it seems like their best. Obviously, when Aaron Carter's coming down the middle, that's gonna be a big play. But I mean, when you're having to rush six plus people, then I mean, Spencer Rattler's a guy who can get out of the pocket. I mean, if you do give him all day to throw, then he'll dot them up. But yeah, I mean, I don't think they showed enough this week just because of that third quarter. Because once UTSA started driving it, there wasn't really much stopping them until the offense finally got back to form.
Speaking of getting out of the pocket, Joe Milton was the second leading rusher on Saturday. We saw that. Take that stat, I guess, with a grain of salt. He had the 81-yard touchdown run on the first play of the game. He finished with a career-high 89 yards total. So he wasn't necessarily running a ton, but we also know how poorly this offensive line has played, which means he needs to be able to run. On that same note, he got awkwardly tackled going into halftime, and he comes out of halftime with a knee brace on, which is not what you want to see. Josh Heupel updated his injury status, which we wrote about on Monday. There was an injury update in the article, despite what the Facebook comments say. Josh Heupel said there's nothing to worry about with Joe Milton. His knee is fine. They expect him to play well on Saturday. Still, even if there's nothing wrong with your knee, there's still that mental block, like, hey, I felt something in my knee, like I don't want to test it too much. But they want to establish him on the ground because then that adds the option game. It makes it harder you have to run a QB contain every play. And it just makes him harder to bring down with an offensive line that's struggling. Jack, what did you see from Joe Milton in the run game? And do you think, is that enough for him and Tennessee to even, enough for defenses to respect, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Will defenses respect Joe Milton on the ground?
I mean, and the other thing is you don't exactly want Joe Milton running a ton against UTSA because then you bring in that re-injury risk. So I think that game was called differently once that play happened. I think they were a lot more conservative with Milton running the ball from that point forward. But going back to the first half, I mean, if Joe Milton's going to, even if he doesn't run it for 81 yards, if he can break off a 10, 15-yard carry every now and again, you have to respect that. Or else Tennessee can and should just take it.
Yeah, and that was something that Hendon Hooker did so well that we haven't seen Joe Milton do is navigate the pocket. Hendon Hooker's pocket presence was elite. And I don't know if that's something you can necessarily teach, but when the play wasn't there, when he was getting blitzed, Hendon Hooker still got 5, 6, 7 yards on the ground. And that kept the chains moving. He didn't take the sack, or he didn't just throw it away or overthrow his receiver. I don't know if we can see that consistently from Joe, especially after the injury-ish, whatever you want to call it, that happened on Saturday. And even moving forward, I don't know how much you want your starting quarterback to be running in SEC play, because linebackers and safety see that quarterback start running. They're giving him their best hit, no matter what. I mean, we've seen it before. I mean, he could be sliding on the ground, and defensive players are going to still give it their best shot. Eric, what do you think about Joe Milton on the ground?
I mean, I don't think he's someone that should be running 20 times a game, of course. But I mean, it's not like he's a fragile guy. He's what, 6'5", 240-ish?
Yeah.
So I mean, that does leave room for them to take out the legs, but at the same time, I mean, you saw it at Virginia. He stopped like mid-run and just leaned forward and got 5 yards. So I think, I mean, that's something I've been saying for weeks that they should do, is get Joe Milton more involved in the run game, because that just adds much more dynamic. Because if he was maybe dicing up defenses, then I would say keep doing it. But it's not like he is. I mean, you have his 14 of 16 stretch, and then you also have 8 consecutive missed passes. So I think you have to find a way to get some of those yards, and I think the way to do that is on the run. And I mean, I think, like you said, psychologically it could play a part, because I think someone who Joe Milton is compared to a lot is Anthony Richardson, just because of for draft purposes, and they have the same like physical profile, and I think it's a thing Tennessee fans like to see him as a high draft pick, but you saw it with Anthony Richardson. You saw him in the Utah game last year. He ran really well, but then next week in Kentucky, he started getting beat up, and the psychological part played in it. So I think that is something you're gonna see. It's natural, so we'll just have to see. I think they should run him, but
I know you talked about Joe Milton not dicing up defenses. It doesn't feel like the playbook has been opened at all. I mean, there's nothing intermediate. It's clear that either they don't trust Joe to throw the intermediate, or they just don't want to do it. But it's either screens behind the line of scrimmage or deep shots over the top. And I don't think you can be successful against an SEC team when you're only playing super, super close or super, super far, because then they can just vacate the middle of the field. And if they know you're not going to try it, and they know that even if you do try it, that you're going to fail 9 times out of 10, I think that, I mean, they'll give it to you. They don't. If Joe Milton can't complete an intermediate pass, then so be it. But I mean, Jack, what is your take really on the play calling right now and what offense they're trying to run? Because we don't see, the 10, 15-yard curls anymore, the post routes over the middle. It's either over the top, and some people got mad at Joe Milton for overthrowing, air quotes, overthrowing Ramel Keaton. I thought that was probably one of his smarter throws, because it's either Ramel catches that ball or nobody catches that ball. And I feel like there's a couple of deep balls like that as well, where they aren't overthrows, but they're intentionally thrown to where it's not going to be an interception. It's either hitting the turf or his guy in the hands. So other than that, I mean, it's just wide receiver screens. And I feel like we've seen so many wide receiver screens that, I mean, we could go coach a game ourselves and just run their wide receiver screen. What do you think, Jack?
So here's what I mean. If it's a case of Heupel not opening, or if it's a case of Heupel or Hasley not opening up the offense, then I don't understand, because you have to have, if you don't have, like you said, if you don't have that intermediate presence, people are just going to crowd the line of scrimmage and then have safety sit back. And there's no real, if you have safeties who are saying there's no way this is going to turn into a 15-yard curl, they're going long, then that's incredibly easy to defend against. If it's a Joe Milton trust issue, then I don't understand why, after he's been in your system in 21 and been in your system in 22, if you don't trust him, why is he your quarterback? Now, I'm not saying that we should put Nico in. That Tennessee should put Nico in. That is not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is, if you don't trust him to make these throws, then he's not who your starting quarterback should be. Because if he can't complete a 10-yard pass over the middle, that's unacceptable at
Yeah.
the Tennessee starting quarterback.
And those throws were essential to the offense they ran last year because those short intermediate throws, yes, screens were mixed in. That's nothing new. But those short intermediate throws bring the defensive backs up, and then you can throw it over top.
Right.
Now you don't have that intermediate game that we saw last year. And I know, Eric, you've said a ton that they need to stop trying to make Joe like Hendon. I wonder if Hendon's a good quarterback. Like, that's a guy you would want to play like. Maybe let Joe try to play like Hendon. Yes, you want him to air it out, but people know that Joe's going to want to air it out, so they're going to defend against that. You have to establish that game in front to let that happen. What do you think, Eric?
I mean, that's fair. I mean, obviously the system works with a guy like Hendon Hooker. It's just, my thing is he's not Hendon Hooker. And I think you could try to, I don't see why they're not throwing those, like, no matter who your quarterback is, you have to find an intermediate game. So it's like, if the playbook isn't open, I still think if the playbook isn't open, you should still be throwing those passes. I mean, you don't have like the, you don't throw in the plays where you saw Jalen Hyatt getting wide open every other route. But I mean, I think if the playbook's not open, those plays should still be in there. So I really don't know what it is. Obviously, nobody likes to see screens thrown the whole game. It's just, I mean, for entertainment purposes and just effectiveness, the occasional screen, if you're doing well in all of their facets of the passing game, is fine. But when you just see him snap and immediately throw the screen, it's just not a good sign. But I mean, as far as Hendon, I don't think that he can do that. Obviously, you can't do that to the caliber of Hendon Hooker. I think you do throw in those intermediate passes, of course, but yeah.
Let's pivot to more this week, or I guess even last year, I would say. Tennessee, which will be printed in our paper by the time this comes out. Tennessee traveled to South Carolina last year. We all know how that ended. Was not good. Ended a playoff run. Hendon Hooker tore his ACL, ended his Heisman run. Basically, everything that could have went wrong for Tennessee did in that game. That's very easy to remember. I mean, if you ask any Tennessee fan about 2022, it'll probably come up. Yet, when you ask the players if they have any extra motivation this weekend with South Carolina coming to Neyland after what happened last year, they all say no, that they're just worried about this weekend. I feel like that's a good thing to say, but I don't know if that's actually the truth. I mean, what do you think, Jack? I feel like it could be very easy to want to look back to last year for revenge.
I mean, as a player, you're always going to just completely cast off any doubt. Be like, no, we're just worried about the game. Kirby Smart says we're going to go 7-5, whatever it may be. You're never going to get these super fiery, yeah, South Carolina beat us, we want to show them up, they intentionally put sand in their field to make Hendon. You're never going to get a player to say that. You're never going to get a coach to say that. Unless your coach is Deion Sanders. But I can't really say how the team's feeling just because what they say. Because I feel like in 9 times out of 10, you're going to get that same exact quote no matter what the situation is.
Yeah, I feel like it's more so you don't want to give South Carolina bulletin board material. Say like, oh, we're coming for revenge. We're really going to get Spencer Rattler this year. Stuff like that. I find it very hard to believe, especially, I mean, even McCallum Castle's talked about how he remembered last year and how he realized like the effect that game had really on the program. I mean, think about it. Tennessee beat South Carolina last year. Hendon Hooker is going to New York. Whether he wins the Heisman or not is a different story, but he's going to New York. And they're in the conversation for a playoff spot because Georgia wins the SEC and Tennessee beat Alabama. So that's probably Tennessee's spot at the 4. Yet you lost to a subpar South Carolina team. Now Tennessee's playing that same South Carolina team on Saturday, and both teams are in very, very, very different circumstances. It's super early in the season. Eric, I feel like whether they want to or not, there's going to be some bad blood from last season.
I mean, I don't think there's any way that there can't be. I don't think this is any other game for Tennessee. I don't think that, just like Heupel said it at Florida too. Like, this is just another week. I don't know the exact quote, but I don't think this is any other game, and I think whether you say it outside or not, internally, I think you have to make it almost like I don't mean to go the Dion route, but you have to make it personal because this game does mean something. I think you should be fired up for this game. I think like you look back and as you see them saying it's just another game against Florida, that didn't. I don't know how they were preaching that inside the locker room, but also there were reports of Billy Napier giving Florida players a history lesson on the rivalry, stuff like that, making it not every other game because to me it's just not.
But then you have the Deion Sanders thing where I saw it on Twitter. I can't remember who tweeted it, but if Deion Sanders puts every team up on a pedestal every week, talking trash with the coach, he respects Oregon, whatever. When you put every team you play on a pedestal, your team is going to play like that team is on a pedestal and you're trying to knock them down. I don't know if you want that mentality for Tennessee in the SEC. It might be a good mentality for a team like Colorado, who probably is going to play every team they play this year be worse than.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, you're trying to knock off the big dog. Tennessee does not – I don't know if they want to take that mentality into Saturday because on paper, South Carolina is probably not as good of a team, but neither was Florida, and we saw how that turned out. So, if you were the coaching staff, Jack, what would you be preaching this week?
I mean, as a New England Patriots fan,
Jack.
As a New England Patriots fan, I'm familiar with the concept of do your job, and I think that's just what it comes down to. Just take on your assignment, do your job, and let the rest of everything handle themselves. I mean, Tennessee's talent at most positions is better than South Carolina's. If every player just doesn't worry about everyone else, doesn't panic, doesn't let the moment get to them, doesn't let the noise or whatever it may be get to them, which
they are at home.
I know, I understand that. But I think that if you just focus on your assignment, that's what I would be preaching, because I think if you do that, then this should be a 2-score game.
Mm-hmm.
Should be a 2-score game.
I did not pick it to be a 2-score game, but it should be a 2-score game.
I'm actually pulling up your pick right now. That you were the only person who submitted their pick on time this week at 7:26 a.m. Jack Church projected South Carolina to score 20 points and Tennessee to score 27. I mean, the spread opened up way larger than I would have expected. I mean, that's a pretty reasonable pick, I guess. I don't think Tennessee wins this game, if I'm being 100% honest with you. I don't think they couldn't. I think Florida is better than South Carolina. Yeah, and I mean, the Swamp probably spots you 7 points. Neyland probably does the same thing, but I don't know if this team has righted the ship enough. I believe the defense can stop Spencer Rattler this year. Maybe not stop every time, like Eric mentioned earlier, but I think they can get enough stops. I don't trust the offense to score consistently. Because if you all of a sudden, like the 8 straight incompletions we saw, if Joe Milton all of a sudden can't pass anymore, just load the box. I mean, there's nothing else you can do.
Yeah. If Tennessee plays every quarter like they did the first quarter against UTSA, they'll be fine. If they have a lull in the third quarter again, that's where we could start to see problems. If they have 2 quarters like that, then I think it shifts towards South Carolina being the more likely team to win.
I know you picked Tennessee, but how do you see the game turning out? I don't know if we're going to have another preview podcast this week, so we better do it while we're on here. What do you think, Jack?
I think that it's probably going to be a tie game at halftime. I think Rattler's going to come out throwing. I probably see it as 10-10, 14-14 at halftime. And I just think in the second half that the defense is going to start playing into the game. I mean, Spencer Rattler got sacked 9 times by North Carolina in the opening game. South Carolina's offensive line isn't the strongest. If you have defensive linemen get to the quarterback, they will make a substantial effect, and they will slow down that South Carolina offense.
And I think they can get to the quarterback. I mean, we see it happen. It didn't travel to Florida that much in the first half, but, I mean, sacking the quarterback at any level is not easy. So, even against an Austin Peay, Virginia, or a UTSA, you're still getting to the quarterback. And when they're not getting sacks, they're in the backfield.
Mm-hmm.
And they talked about it today a little bit, that push. Rodney Garner talked about how important the interior push was. Because Spencer Rattler is another guy with very good pocket presence, played quarterback forever. When you rush off the edge, he's just going to step up. Well, if you have push from everywhere, he's trapped.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important that we see disciplined rushes from guys like Tyler Van Amari Thomas, Omar Norman Lott, to keep those lanes, because the second you leave that lane, Spencer Rattler's getting that 5-6 yards on the ground.
Right, and that's exactly what I said. Do your job. Just focus on your lane. Let everyone else take care of themselves. Don't try to chase them down. I mean, it doesn't even have to be a sack. If you can get him to throw it earlier than he wants 5 or 6 times, you're probably going to get an interception on one of those. Theoretically, and then that can completely swing the game your direction.
Yeah, I definitely think turnovers will be important. Eric, how do you see it playing out?
It's tough because everything. It worked for me last week. Everything in me says game in the Neyland.
The Neyland Stadium.
Everything in me says night game at Neyland, Tennessee wins. I don't think it's going to be easy, but I think my score prediction was 34-31. I think it's 7:30 kickoff and
dark mode
jerseys.
Which Squirrel White said were, quote, tight. So
yeah, I mean, I'm kind of on the same page as Jack. I think it's going to be a close one, probably tied at half. But I think, I don't know. I think it, offensive line wise, it's probably the same on both. Maybe I'm sure South Carolina's is a little worse, but I think Tennessee is going to be able to get to him. Like you guys said, it's going to depend on how they get to him. Like, is it just going to be Aaron Beasley breaking through the line and Spencer Rattler taking a step, or is it going to be Aaron Beasley coming through the middle and Roman Harrison off the edge? I don't know if that's a good example, but
and it helps coming out today on Tuesday that Shane Beamer ruled out star receiver Juice Wells out for the game. Last season when he played Tennessee, he had 11 catches for 177 yards. So that was a big contributor. Now, that wasn't a surprise, though, and they've relied on other receivers this season. I really do think the game will be won and lost in the trenches. That's an easy way out for every answer about football in the SEC, but I really do think it is, because if South Carolina gets pushed and Tennessee can't run the ball, Tennessee can't pass the ball, well, Tennessee can't score. And we see it night in and night out with this team compared to last year. Hendon Hooker was never on the ground. I mean, even think when he got injured, he wasn't getting hit. He just fell.
Yeah.
Joe Milton has probably gotten hit or sacked more through 4 games. That's a stat that I'll probably look up after this. Than Hendon Hooker probably did all last season. Just because that defensive line was so stout. You had Darnell Wright, a first-round pick, playing offensive line for you. Cooper Mays was at center. Cooper Mays might play this week, might not play this week. Who knows?
We'll see Saturday.
Yeah, we'll see Saturday if he can handle it in warm-ups. But, I mean, seriously, the offensive line is an issue, and then your defensive line is shining on the other side, and South Carolina's offensive line is an issue. So whichever team gets more pass rush will probably win this game, and I would have to lean South Carolina's way. Tennessee has not shown me anything to stroke confidence. Because what happens if South Carolina just sits on screen passes all night? What are you going to do?
Yeah, that's completely fair. Like I said, night game in Neyland. That's pretty much my whole. Which it's probably not a good basis, but I mean that's kind of my whole basis on the pick. I think Tennessee comes out and scores first possession like they always do, but what's gonna happen after that is gonna really tell the tale of the whole game. So, and I'll say it again. If obviously Spencer Rattler's probably gonna have some solid numbers, but I mean same thing with Florida. I'd say under like 125 yards rushing, and Tennessee wins the game.
So, Jack, you got Tennessee. Eric's got Tennessee. I have South Carolina. Might be a make or break for the Pick'ems this week. Speaking of, let me just flex the standings. Eric had a perfect week in week 4, so now he's second. He went from, I don't think he picked a game right besides Tennessee in one of the weeks, but so now he's second.
I was 2 of 5.
I'm at 21-7. Eric's at 19-9. Jack's at 17-11. Madeline McNeely, one of our writers, 1711. Tanner, 1711. And then our managing editors at 15 and 13. So, Jack tied last year. Who'd you tie with?
Eric.
All right. So, it's coming down to the wire.
Caleb didn't play.
I did not play. I did not. DNP. I was out last season. Redshirted. Redshirted last season of the Pick'ems.
The SEC bias killed me in the first 2 weeks, and
Hey,
then
SEC
there
bias.
wasn't any SEC bias this week because it was all SEC games. Well, it was all conference games.
SEC bias got me Missouri over Kansas State, though, so I'll take it. I just knew Thicker, the kicker, was going to hit that 61-yard field goal.
So.
All right. I think that is all we have for today. In the Zone, the Daily Beacon Sports podcast. You can find all of our content at utdailybeaconsports.com. Jack Church has thorough coverage of our soccer team, which is traveling to Starkville on Friday night, as will our volleyball team, which is traveling to Starkville on Friday night. They will both play Mississippi State on Friday night.
Volleyball got that big win over Kentucky on Sunday, now up to 12 in the polls, I believe.
Yeah. So every time they rank up, it is the highest since a year that was a long time ago. So, volleyball's doing good. Soccer's doing good. We have coverage of both. Golf. We'll have golf on Wednesday. Football, obviously, which we just spent 30 minutes talking about. So, lots of stuff happening at utdailybeaconsports.com. I encourage you to pick up a paper. It'll have football on the cover this week, allegedly, as I've been told. So, that'll be cool. Eric Woods, Jack Church, I'm Caleb Jarrow, and we will see you next time we record a podcast for In the Zone.